Thanks again for joining us. This is our first panel today, which will be on RRI and ethics in quantum technologies. And instead of me introducing all of you, I will start by asking you to introduce yourself very shortly and your work in quantum technologies. So let's start with Maria.
Hi, I'm Maria, and I'm a second-year PhD student at University of Bristol Center for Doctoral Training. My PhD is focused on building a modulator for mid-infrared in silicon, and as a part of broader effort to build scalable quantum optical system in silicon. So apart from that, I'm also co-founder of Quantum Serbia, organization aimed at building a quantum landscape in Serbia, and an advisor at One Quantum Balkans. And since I struggled to get a scholarship to go abroad and learn quantum, I'm quite keen on looking at creating equal opportunities in quantum for developing countries. That would be all. Thanks, Eki.
Thanks, Maria. And let's continue with Peter.
Hello, I'm Peter Hamas, working as philosopher of technology at TU Delft. I have a background in philosophy of quantum mechanics and became a philosopher of technology at TU Delft. So now I'm combining the two by doing research on philosophy of quantum technology. I will be part of a larger Dutch program called Quantum Data NL, which is about to start soon in the Netherlands, and that is a large multi-million project, mainly technology, of course, but it's interesting because it has a large chunk of what is called ELSA research on the development itself. So vision will be integrated into that. That's where I will leave it.
Perfect. And let's continue with Alexei.
Hello, yeah, this is really perfect because, of course, with Peter, we've been having conversations about quantum technologies and society for a number of years, and also writing recently this manifesto that you may have seen on Archive, and also some publications from the past. So there are plenty of conversations that we've already had, and it's good to continue with this particular one. So thank you, Zeki, for the invitation. I work in foundations and philosophy of quantum theory and quantum information theory. I also, as a philosopher and ethicist, work in ethics of emerging technologies for the last 20 years. So this is really a bit like for Peter, a conjunction of two separate interests, and it's great to be here. I've recently organized a major conference in Foundations of Quantum Theory, the 20th European Conference, Foundations in Paris. And what I've been arguing for many years is to use post-quantum models, to use quantum games, to use models like PR boxes, or all these methods for teaching quantum mechanics differently, and not, in the way it was taught in the 60s. So I'm very interested in all of the educational initiatives, and there's a lot going on in France. I'll tell you another time about everything we're doing here. So this is really starting, and my position is at CEA, which is a huge research institute leading or co-leading the enormous French investment in quantum technologies. France is putting billions and billions in this area specifically. So we're also very much involved in building the science and society relation at the national level, starting from our daily conversations with people involved in experimental, theoretical quantum information, and all the way to journalists, educators, and so on. So the full spectrum, if you like. That's the kind of presentation.
Thank you. And finally, Mark, from the newest heavyweight in the field, and I'm really excited about what he will talk about.
Thank you, Zeki. So it's a pleasure to be here. Hi, everyone. I'm Mark Jackson. I'm the quantum evangelist at the new company called Quantinuum, which just existed a week ago. It's a merger between Cambridge Quantum and Honeywell Quantum Solutions. And so we're very excited about this. I'm normally based in New York City, but at the moment I'm in California attending the Quantum to Business conference. In fact, I've seen some of Peter's Dutch colleagues over at the booth, and I've spoken with them. Ik spreek niet zo goed Nederlands, but yes. So I'm the quantum evangelist. So a lot of what I do is publicizing and promoting quantum technologies and what we do.
Thank you. Perfect. And I will start with my first question, and it is hopefully a little bit provocative. Is it an appropriate time to discuss RRI and ethics in QT? Is it too soon or too late? So let's go with the same order, and let's go reverse. Let's start with Mark.
Okay, sure. So I don't think it's too soon at all. In fact, I'm very happy to see a lot of responsibility and ethics type issues come into quantum computing already. And I can give a few examples. So first, there's been a major trend towards open sourcing. So there's a group called the Unitary Fund, which is a nonprofit which encourages open source type projects. Our own compiler and software development kit, which is called Ticket, about 2 months ago, we made it open source, as well as our quantum natural language processing toolkit is completely open source. So anyone can use it and see every line of code in it. There's also been things like the IEEE ethics panel, which has talked about responsible use of quantum computing. So I'm glad that responsibility and ethics are being baked into the fabric of quantum technologies.
Thanks. So, Alexei?
Yes, so I think these conversations very naturally belong to the ongoing conversation about science, technology, and society. In Horizon 2020, we used to call it responsible research and innovation. Now the European Commission is using a slightly different language. But definitely, this to me is very much a continuation of the conversations that we had 15 or 12 years ago on nano and society. I think literally every single word uttered by Tara Robertson in her 15-minute presentation has been already said about nanotechnology 15 years ago. So this is really a continuation of those efforts. And the question is there something specific to quantum technologies in the sense of science and society that we need to look at here? And definitely the answer is yes. And the answer is that there's an increased mystery because of the symbolic halo around the word quantum. And the sooner we start to think about methods to deal with it, to talk about it with the public, the better. So definitely not too late, and probably definitely not too soon, and probably already kind of late. We need to get much more new tools and methods than the Schrödinger cat. We're kind of tired. I think the cat is already kind of tired and old. Probably we need to invent more specific tools and methods for talking to society about quantum technologies. At the same time, it's also very clear that this is not something new. These conversations about the ineffable technologies that the citizen cannot see or feel or understand. These conversations about ineffable technologies have been there before, and we need to learn from them and to continue them with this particular generation of ineffable technologies.
Thank you. And Peter?
So the original question is: are we? Should we start with responsible innovation? Yes, we should just start because the applications, not all applications are known. Many will be discovered, but a few are already known. So let's talk about how to deal with these applications in a responsible way. But what I also see is that we actually, a bit in contrast to what Mark just said, that responsible research and innovation is not baked into quantum. I would say, actually, we are stopping, and before doing it, we first want to address a couple of other questions, and I think we should stop addressing these questions. One of these questions is actually just right on the table now. So the previous presentations were on education. And there's a kind of feeling that you first should educate the other before you can do RRI, or responsible research innovation. I think we should not do that because it introduces a kind of hierarchy between the participants in the debate. I should first explain you what quantum is, and then you may respond to me if you like it or not. I think that's the wrong starting point. Is not necessary. The second is following on Alexa, is what we academics do is always, before we do something, say RRI of quantum, we have to address the question, what is specific new to this? We cannot just start with RRI, but we first have to answer the question to our peers, what is the research gap? And then we come up with questions about the enigma of quantum or the halo of quantum. Also, I think we should stop with that, but just say, well, maybe quantum is not so new. Maybe there are some special specialities to it. But for doing RRI, we just continue and just copying from Nano. We don't have to stop first thinking about if there's something special. So to summarize, I think we should start and stop with first talking about education or about the speciality of quantum.
Thanks. And we will come to that in our second question as well, but let's continue with Maria on our first question. Is it too soon, too late?
So I believe it's a due time to discuss both RRI and ethics in quantum technologies. Discussions on ethics in quantum have been out there for longer, I would say, but however, there are still no definitive ethical guidelines. The quantum technologies are now at, I would say, turning point at which the research is transitioning from the covers of Nature to covers of Financial Times. And the stakeholders should respond in a timely manner and take actions during this stage while the Pandora's box has not been opened yet. So I think we should bear in mind that the costs of corrective actions are multiple times more when a service is in the operational phase compared to design phase. So basically, there is no better time than now for these problems to be addressed. For responsible research and innovation, I would say it's not too late, but could have been addressed sooner, because ethical considerations themselves are merely prerequisite and should be one of principles embedded in responsible research and innovation. But I think it's naive to just reduce everything to ethics, because RRI should give the researchers and innovators a set of actions that will ease proper embedding of technological advancements into society. So RRI should be rules to follow, in my opinion, actions to take, and would make the decision-making for us, people in labs, much easier. So those principles should be reviewed at each step of the technology development process, allowing stakeholders to anticipate potential threats and verify what is the value research would bring to society. So basically, we cannot afford ourselves luxury to wait for these actions to be taken. Also, I think that discussing RRI early on in case of quantum technologies is maybe crucial due to the nature of the field, because public is to some extent aware of term quantum, but not many people know what the word quantum entails, and that creates a big space of opportunity for people to have adverse reactions to yet unknown and maybe in layman's size a potentially harmful technology. So we want to prevent any negative beliefs from being created while we still can, I think.
Thanks, Maria. And I think we can seamlessly pass to our second question, which was, can we use experiences of other fields before quantum technologies, like nanotech or biotech, or does QT require development of certain specific tools to quantum? And with this question, I think we can start with Alexei, because he already touched upon the question, and we can later continue with Mark, because they are actually at the forefront of developing these technologies.
Yes, so thank you, Zaki. Indeed, I think we are very much in absolutely continuum and quantinuum from the epoch of nano. And we have this discussion many times also with Armin Grunwald, who was supposed to be here, but I think he can't join us. We both remember very, very well, and also Christopher Kuhn, and of course, the same kinds of discussions on nano. So when Peter says, what is new? Well, yes, there's this new halo of mystery around nano, around quantum, and as it has been said already, quantum is not a new term. It comes with all the baggage from the 20th century. Schrödinger cat, if you think you understand it, maybe think twice, you actually don't understand it, and so on. So all the things we inherited from the debates on interpretation of quantum theory, and the public has heard something about it, indeed. So quantum technologies probably need to actually separate themselves, to delimit themselves from this baggage of the past. If we invest billions and billions, oh, Armin is here, that's great. If we invest billions and billions in something that is about mystery, then society will probably ask us, you know, how come you're doing this? Explain to us what this is useful for. So we need to invent a new language about resources that are useful for practical tasks. And that's the first difference from nano. Although, again, there are a lot of similarities. 90% of what has been said by Tara Robertson, what Maria has mentioned, we've heard that already. It's important, and we should take it over. There's also a second difference, something that I think Mark will also continue discussing. At the time of these debates on nanotechnology, we very much discussed user-oriented products, things that go directly on the market for consumers. Now, when we're talking about quantum, we're mostly talking for products for businesses, products for B2B markets. We're very little talking about B2C markets right now, at least, at this stage. This is a big difference. When we talked about nanotechnology, it was mostly B2C. Today, it's mostly B2B. It does shape differently the societal debate. So there are these two differences, but also huge similarities. That's what I wanted to say.
Thank you. And we can continue with Mark.
Thank you. So I know nothing about nanotechnology, so I'm afraid that I can't make any useful comments about that context. But one historical precedent that I've heard a lot about is with the nuclear arms race. There's talk of sort of a quantum arms race, especially between China and the Western powers. And this is because quantum technology can be used for these types of things. So there's a close relationship between cryptography and quantum computing. So quantum computers could be used to hack communications, but quantum technologies can also be used to protect against hacking. So you have the double-edged sword there. And with biotechnology, quantum computing could be used to design personalized medicine, but that also means you could use it to design personalized biological weapons. And so, as was just mentioned by Alexei, it's true, it's not going to be used by individuals. It's often going to be governments or businesses that are doing this. And the power is very localized. There's only a few businesses or governments that have the power to use quantum technology right now. And very few people are familiar with quantum computing and can actually take advantage of it. And so I think what's strange about quantum is that a lot of power is being concentrated in very few individuals or organizations.
Okay, thank you. And let's continue with Maria and finish with Peter.
So I think we can learn from those experiences for start, but I think quantum technologies are rather specifics because we can anticipate some future technological developments, but with the first full-scale real-world applications being at least 5 years away, it is quite hard to fully assess impacts of these technologies. So as with previous disruptive emerging technologies, these applications have the potential for huge benefit, offering new economic opportunities as well as targeting societal challenges. But we can also begin to anticipate some of dynamics that may influence the development of this area. The ethical, social, and political concerns arising from this range of technologies will depend on the uses to which they are put. So it is hard to distinguish at this stage which of these concerns arise from defining features of the technology, which are unique to quantum, and which may be shared with other emerging technologies such as nano. So for comparison, nanotech were perceived as seemingly non-risk technologies for quite a long time, with quite a low public perception in the 90s. But then the prefix nano in 2000 started being perceived as highly risky, and the public debate raised from this shift in perception led to technology assessment and an attribute responsible being added to guidelines on performing research in this field. So at that point, introducing responsibility was rather like a vague notion, but it has done its job, calming down the public anxiety triggered by enormous potential that field had. So what is similar and what is different with quantum? So based on discussions with broad public, it is a relief that word quantum is not yet associated with harmful technologies. And people are either neutral or at least familiar with the term and have a vague notion about the potential that QT have. So I believe that we should use this currently good position to first of all make the knowledge about the technologies available to public, because only the informed discussion can be fruitful and actually answer what values the society needs from ongoing research efforts. So QT is specific and it's quite complex theory. So in a way, it sets it apart from other examples. However, that is not something that cannot be overcome. Because, for example, transistors, now widely used technology, are based on quantum effects, but that in a way prevented them from being used. So basically, we just need some extra planning into disseminating information, an extra caution with the wording, and we have a good chance to put ourselves in good position for productive dialogue, I would say.
Thank you, Maria. And last word goes to Peter, and I'm sure he has a lot of things to say about the nano stuff as well.
Yeah, I'm wondering who owns the problem of quantum, that we had that quantum mystery, which it is part of the root of quantum mechanics, and maybe part of the it's in the minds of the initial researchers in quantum technology. My experience is when you talk with the public, or people outside industry, governments, and you just say, okay, well, forget about the quantum stuff, but let's talk about applications. What Mark also mentioned, there's a sovereignty issue. You can break encryption. Let's talk about these applications. Then we can just immediately start, and no one will stop that conversation by saying, yeah, but actually, tell me first about Schrödinger's cat, otherwise I will not continue. Now, that won't happen. So we can just do responsible research innovation if we just suppress that impulse to think back to the mystery of quantum. So with that approach, focusing applications, I think you can use all the experiences of previous technologies to do responsible research innovation. special features which then come to the fore. I think indeed what Alexei, Mark was saying, it's mainly B2B, maybe a few stakeholders, big tech, big companies, of a big states who can do it. Yeah, that is a novelty which we will encounter. Maybe the the national security impulse at all, so that all of a sudden the secret services are involved. Whether that's new, well, I think with Star Wars we saw something similar when lasers were being developed to shoot satellites out of the sky. So also there's not something new, but definitely, yeah, a specific quantum thing where we can look back and how the discussion was 20 years ago. So that would be my point. Just forget about quantum. Just go on.
Okay, thank you. And also I see that there is a constructive discussion going on in the chat regarding the dual use issue. Philip, would you like to make your comment public, or should we continue with the questions planned? Okay, I'm continuing the questions. And let's start this question with Mark. When you look at the discussions in the community, and this is especially important since we are now at QTB, what do you think is currently missing in terms of RRI and ethics? I mean, it's not a question about whether RRI and ethics are missing, but what is missing in terms of RRI and ethics in the community?
I think the big question is we don't yet quite know what we're going to do with quantum computers. I think Maria made a mention of this. There's still a big question mark. People are very excited about it, and we're starting to write programs for quantum computers, but we still think that we're 3 to 5 years away from commercial deployment of this. And so it's hard to come up with practical ethics when we don't quite yet know what we're doing with them. And so I think that's been a lot of it. I'm happy that we're having discussions like this so that we're aware of it. But I think it's really just coming up with a practical set of ethics until we know what we're doing.
And Maria? Can I jump in? So we do know that we will break encryption, and we do know that we will that quantum computing can be used for improving chemistry, the processes, as well as the modeling of the substance itself. So I don't see your point that we don't know how we will apply it. We know already a bit.
Sure, we expect that we will be able to break RSA or other types of encryption soon. We don't know when, and we don't know exactly which organizations would be in a position to do so. There's also quantum communication like QKD, quantum key distribution, which are being developed, but it's not clear how we will be able to use this. And then on the chemistry side, yes, we expect that we'll be able to make advances, but we haven't quite done it yet, and we don't know when personalized medicine might be possible.
Yeah, can I comment on that also, please? Yeah. I think both of you are kind of right? So if we're presenting the whole area of quantum technologies to the public with the idea that this is first and foremost about quantum computation, building a universal quantum computer, and this may never happen. You know, look at what is going on. We have NISQ computation with D-Wave that is not universal. We have boson sampling that is not universal. And we're still a long way from building anything that would do quantum error correction in any meaningful way so that we can have a universal machine. So it's funny that, you know, this big thing which people think about first, quantum computers, universal quantum computers, are not the ones that is going to be happening very soon. what is happening are quantum sensors, quantum metrology, Peter, things you've mentioned, right? Chemical things, so adiabatic or non-universal computing tasks, and of course, cryptography massively, so, and communication. That is an interesting problem to me. How come we're building an image based on something that will not come true anytime soon, or maybe not in the next 5 years and not in the next 10 years, whereas already there are things that are there and work very well. And we're not talking first about them, we're talking first about this big vision. And this vision, of course, is very much exaggerated, and some would say, maybe hyped, that there are very serious scientists who, of course, will even put into question the very possibility of a useful universal quantum computer. So that is a very interesting turn. We didn't have that with nano or something, right? I mean, we had the nano robots or whatever, but here we have this big thing that everybody first thinks about, which is not really happening tomorrow, whereas all the interesting little applications, which are not so small actually, they're kind of hidden behind. And that to me is a puzzle.
Would you like to comment on this, Mark, or would you like to continue?
No, I think he made some very good points, but I have nothing else to add.
Okay, so Maria, can you continue with your answer, or?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
So, well, from a perspective of a PhD student that has now spent 4 years surrounded with the quantum research community in smaller or larger extent, I realized that RRI is not much talked about. The ethical considerations are something that I remember from start of my learning in quantum, but that was merely a discussion on application as cryptography, privacy risks, possibility of decryption of data for safety reasons, and so on, which are quite obvious questions. But as a researcher, I only encountered the term RRI this year, a few months ago, more precisely, and that happened completely by chance and was not related to my work at all. So I believe that we as research community just need to embed responsibility in thinking about consequences much more than it's the case at the moment. So I know that day-to-day research and focus on our PhD projects or, like chasing publications does often prevent us from seeing research results as something that could later give benefits or cause harm. But that is something we should make a habit of doing. So maybe the complexity of quantum physics and basically researchers' centrality to development puts them into a privileged position in ongoing discussions about the regulations in quantum technologies. But scientists may be seen as responsible for ensuring that scientific knowledge is honestly and openly communicated to society as a whole. Scientists are also expected to allow for and enable a dialogue which helps shape the future developments in quantum technologies. But scientists are only people with usually massive to-do lists and limited capacity to foresee the consequences of their work. So these things require lots of training. So I feel like institutions, the academic ones first, should dedicate more funds to RRI training and raising awareness of researchers, because they're like on the first line, I would say. So I know there have been projects around insisting on public participation, but those are other outreach activities. So while I completely agree that informing public about the results of projects funded by taxpayers is a right thing to do, we need more of a dialogue and more researchers that are trained to use the right wording and right approach when talking to public. So, because only with the supportive institutional setting and a new, more precautionary way of doing science enabled by dialogue will ensure that we use QT's potential to its maximum, basically. So yeah, that's it.
Thank you. And also there is, again, a very constructive discussion going on in the chat. regarding so Oksana has not answered but responded to Alexei that could it be because computers are so much present in our lives and we do not know what a sensor is. So would you like to comment on that?
Oksana, would you like to start and then I will comment?
Thanks. Well, I really like this part that you emphasized because it really appears like a quantum computer bubble in a way, and these are the farthest away technology. I totally agree with you. So I just thought about it that, well, maybe first of all, not the same efforts are dedicated to outreach in different sectors. This is one thing we should really question ourselves about. How much we talk about sensors and how much we talk about quantum computers. I don't think it's balanced at all. But the other thing, which is more intrinsic, is that well, computers are in front of us all the days and sometimes nights. So it's just something we know about, and more technical things like sensors and communication lines are not in front of our eyes. Practically, we don't experience them during the everyday life. And that's why even if somebody tells you that there are these fantastic sensors of single particles that will sense your brainwave maybe in the future in the neuroscience or some other things, it's harder that they stick to them because, well, one day in the future, who knows? Let's say it's not an everyday life experience. That's it.
Yes, I think I agree with what you're saying, but also there's the question of where this mystery of non-classical things is best situated. And I think with quantum computers, you're right, it's people have seen the revolution of classical computing in the last 60 years. And to say that there's something that is even non-classical, even better, that we can compute, and they automatically expect that there will be even bigger results from that than what we've seen from the, the revolution we've seen from information technology in the last 60 years. So when we do something which is non-classical and people understand, I think that quantum means non-classical, implies non-classical. It's relatively easy to talk about computing because it's in the imagination of people. But I think still it's interesting that quantum crypto, whereas, as I said in the chat, we already have working applications of quantum crypto today, is not that much popular with journalists or the general public. It's definitely popular with businesses, but not the general public. And then there are all these emerging topics like, is there entanglement in quantum biology? Or, we can have a big debate on this area called quantum biology. Is there such a thing as quantum effects that are meaningful in biology? And I think that if we have results in those areas, if we can show that entanglement, for example, for certain birds give an advantage for orienting them according to magnetic field of the Earth or things like this. So if we can show that quantum resources like entanglement exist across areas that people are more familiar with, and not only exist, but also are used in those areas, then we can steer these conversations to other disciplines, other application fields, and that would be a real change, but we will see. So far, it's mostly computers.
Okay, and Maria, would you like to comment? I saw you raised your hand.
Yeah, I wanted to comment previously on us having technologies that are already available, like sensors. Well, I would say those technologies, I wouldn't call them disruptive. I would call them maybe improvement of their classical counterparts. But I feel like maybe quantum computer, something maybe that is hyped up right now, should be definitely topic to talk about in next few years, because that is something that's promising like big change in how, you know, like technology works, the whole technological landscape in a way, from both like beneficial but also like from threatening side, I would say, if it makes sense. I don't think like maybe methane sensor as a company from my university sells, okay, it can be used in military purposes. It is mostly used in ecological purposes, but it's not something that I would say like requires too much of ethical dwelling on, you know.
Thanks. And Peter? Yeah.
What's the disruptiveness which you see, Maria? The notion of disruptive is it's such a fashion term. So you need a game changer. You need a disruption because you will become really rich if you do that. So that's the rhetorical side. If you now go to the factual side, so where would you expect a disruption with quantum computing?
Can I interest? Maybe Mark is also really well situated to answer this, because their firm is just really new and it's one of the biggest news of this couple of last weeks, and they really aim for that disruptive technologies, if I get that correct.
Yes, but I want to give Maria a chance to answer the question.
Yeah, of course. And after
no, that's
Maria.
fine. That's fine. Like the first ideas that pop into my mind, like groups around me, they were work like on quantum machine learning, quantum artificial intelligence, and basically like fields that could be potentially dangerous, but will change the way of computation and so on. So that was my idea of what disruptive technology could be. I know it's like a buzzword that people use, but basically that's first that comes to mind of lots of people, I would say, when you talk about quantum.
That would mean that some applications would become a bit faster.
Yeah, but some of the applications could be also controversial, more dangerous, let's say.
More dangerous, but they were already dangerous, but then more dangerous.
Yeah. Okay.
So I'm trying to unpack the disruption. I know that everyone, in order to get billions from the French state, you have to indeed say, okay, well, what's coming is really, really new. No one ever imagined it. So it will disrupt everything. So yeah, then you.
No, I completely agree with you. I'm also not like pro use of big words, especially if we don't know what we are promising. But I feel like a lot of uncertainty around like what will happen in quantum comes from this specifically, because the let's say smaller applications, the applications that sustain right now the research in quantum, are not something that public will hold on to, just because they, you know, like if you told my, I don't know, mom, who's an economist, like we've made an amazing methane sensor, I don't think she will think about looking at, you know, like at gas pipelines or thinking about ecology. It's like not a big deal, you know, like for layman, I would say.
But yeah, let's listen to Mark, where the real disruption will take place. The real disruption.
Sure. So yeah, I think there are two types of applications in quantum computing. So the less interesting one are things like in financial trading, we expect that simulations like Monte Carlo simulations for trading algorithms, they'll be improved by quantum computing, but we already have them. They'll just be more faster and more accurate. So that's perfectly fine, but I don't think it will change our lifestyle. The disruptive ones, as Maria mentioned, I think will be things like chemistry, where we'll be able to design personalized medicine, or at least much more accurate modeling of medicine. Of course, pharmaceutical companies use computers right now, but we're we're shockingly limited by what we can do because molecular simulations can only be done for very simple molecules right now. Most of the drug development process involves rejecting drugs after clinical trials, and that's very costly and expensive and risky for the people involved in those trials. So I think that will be a field that doesn't really exist now, like custom designed computer drug design. I think that will be an example of a disruptive technology. It just doesn't exist now, and in 10 to 20 years, it very well may.
Also, maybe I can just comment on the disruptive side of things, is that as far as I can understand the disruptiveness of anything, it disrupts the opportunity landscape of market structure. So in markets, there is this opportunity landscape where investments and risks are allocated, and the actual disruption happens there. So it's not really something that is related to technology. Something very untechnological can also be a disruptive change. But this is to be discussed in another
Sure, yeah,
day,
innovation can be economic. Yeah.
And since we only have like 5 minutes, maybe we can get a couple of statements from each of you to close this panel. I think it was a very productive panel, and I really hope to continue these discussions in follow-up events in the future. Hopefully face-to-face, but so let's start with Maria and continue with the first order that we introduce ourselves. Also, I think Christopher wants to say something. Are you raising your hand? If not, okay, let's continue with Maria.
Sorry, Zeki, what was the question?
It wasn't a question. So just a couple of closing statements, a couple of sentences, because we have just a couple of minutes. And since Professor Grumald is here, I would like to give him the floor.
Yeah, sure. So I don't know. I'm hoping that this kind of discussions will continue. To me, I got familiar with the topic quite recently, so I believe as a researcher that these are quite beneficial, like for us as researchers in the way we develop our work, but also like to make sure that the people benefit from our work, that it brings some value to society, not only just a paper that no one will read.
Thanks. And I'm sure people will read the papers, by the way.
But not many people. I mean,
yeah.
Like, let's be honest. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, and thank you for joining this panel. Peter, let's continue with you.
Yes, so I would plead for, or I'm also curious to look, I would plead for the moment, to start treating quantum technology as a middle of the road technology, just a normal technology as the others, where you can invest in and where you can get returns from. And as soon as we do that, we can just do middle of the road responsible research and innovation of it, and where we're not stopped by this idea that we can't do RRI because quantum technology is so special. Let's make it normal, middle of the road.
Thank you. And Alexei?
Yes, to continue from where Peter left, you've probably all heard about Roger's innovation curve. So there's no mystery as nanotech before quantum and other technologies in the past. Quantum will live through this hype cycle and then will become normal science and normal technology. This will be coming in the years, maybe 5 or 3, 5, 8 years from now. It will be normal. The hype will disappear. What we can do though during these hype years is to make a renewed educational effort. So I very much applaud all the educational projects that Oksana presented. And I think this should be different from teaching quantum mechanics in the 20th century. We should profit from this hype cycle to create a different language, a different toolkit for talking about quantum technologies to society. We should look at resource theories. We should talk about contextuality, entanglements, tiering, Discord, all the other quantum resources, not just the superposition with the Schrödinger cat. This is really an opportunity to change education, to change what the public, to change the metaphors that the public know. They will never know the mathematics, they just know the metaphors. But let's work on new metaphors and get them into the public symbolic thinking. So we should really be lucid. This hype cycle will end in a couple of years, but let's do things now that can be just done on the top of the hype cycle. Later, it will be too late.
Thank you. And for the last statements, closing statements of this panel, Mark?
Thank you. I think the summaries that the other panelists just provided are exactly right, that it's good we're talking about these things, and in a few years when things are more established, it's good that we'll have a base to build from. I just wanted to include in the chat some links. The first is an article to a Scientific American article written by our CEO, Ilyas Khan, where he talks about some responsible uses in ethics. And the second is a video produced by the Quantum Daily, in which they profile different perspectives on this. And so they discuss things that we've talked about here. So thank you again so much for hosting this, Zeki, and I hope that we can meet in person to continue this.
Yeah, I hope that happens sooner rather than later, but we will see as things progress. And thank you all for joining and for this wonderful discussion.